world used to be a much colder place. Ice ages dominated much of prehistory, and the last ice age, which lasted between 20,000 and 40,000 years ago, covered great portions of the world in sheets of ice. Because so much of the world's water was in ice form, sea levels were much lower than they are today, as much as 150 meters lower. Consequently, more land that had once been the floor of the sea was exposed. Beringia was basically the exposed floor of the Bering Sea between and around Siberia and Alaska. The Bering Strait was part of Beringia, and it connected the two land masses of Siberia and Alaska. Historians theorize that our ancestors crossed the Bering Strait from Siberia into Alaska during the last ice age. Around 20,000 years ago, the ice began to melt and sea levels rose. Eventually, the Bering Strait was again covered in water like it is today. People on each side of it were separated. Unlike Canada, which was covered in vast sheets of ice, Beringia had too arid of a climate to form ice sheets. Instead, it was a steppe region, meaning it was basically a vast prairie that supported many different types of plants. In Beringia's case, these included the dwarf birch, willows, grasses, and herbs. Steppe regions can range from somewhat wooded landscapes to semi-desert ones. Some areas of Beringia may have been tundra, which is an area of land where the subsoil never thaws, also known as permafrost. Because it could support plant life, Beringia could also support animal life. Many animals of the Ice Age went extinct at some point. The woolly mammoth, the mastodon, the giant beaver, the steppe bison, the North American horse, the giant short-faced bear, and the American lion all went extinct sometime after the Ice Age ended. While we don't know everything about how these animals adapted and survived during the Ice Age, archaeologists have recovered many bones, and in some cases, full skeletons, such as from the woolly mammoth and the scimitar cat. From these, archaeologists have been able to extrapolate the approximate size, shape, and appearance, and weight of the woolly mammoth and scimitar cat and other extinct animals. The woolly mammoth, for example, was about the size of today's Asian elephant and weighed more than 3 tons. Surprisingly, though, many animals that lived during the Ice Age are still around in the Americas today. Wolves, caribou, and wolverines are just some examples. Other animals, such as the musk ox, simply moved on to other places after the Ice Age ended. Still, other animals only lived in Beringia between ice ages, presumably when there was more plant life to support them, and are now only found in other parts of the world. Predators in the Beringia were common. Most of them are extinct, but we have a reasonable idea of how large they were and what they looked like, based on the bones that have been found. The scimitar cat, one of Beringia's most ferocious predators, was probably somewhat like the tigers and lions of today in terms of shape and size. It had long canines, which it probably used to cut the throats of the mammoth and mastodon that it hunted. During the Ice Age, humans relied on hunting and gathering their food to survive. They were nomadic because the animals they hunted moved around in search of food. The people of Beringia probably followed and hunted caribou across the plains. This required knowledge of the land as well as animal seasonal patterns. Humans also depended on animals for their clothing and shelter, camping in animal skin tents as they traveled across Beringia. Though they lived a nomadic life, undoubtedly full of hardships, there's some evidence that the people of Beringia tailored their clothes to some degree, processed and preserved their food, and controlled fire. To adapt to such a cold climate, people had to form advanced social ties. Art was a way to communicate, as were the stories and myths that passed on critical knowledge of survival techniques, landscape, animal habits and traits, and social etiquette from one generation to the next. Humans expanded into Beringia during the Late Stone Age, the Upper Paleolithic era, a period of 40,000 to 10,000 years ago. This was probably the final frontier for humans in terms of colonization. Humans had colonized every other major landmass. When they crossed into Beringia, they went into what was truly for them the New World. Let's review. Beringia was the exposed floor of the Bering Sea between and around Siberia and Alaska. The Bering Strait was part of Beringia, and historians theorize that our ancestors crossed the Bering Strait from Siberia into Alaska during the last Ice Age. Beringia was a steppe region, basically a vast prairie that supported many different types of plants and animals. Today, many of those animals are extinct, but archaeologists are able to study the bones that are recoverable. It was during the Late Stone Age that humans expanded into Beringia and entered the New World. Around 20,000 years ago, Bering Strait was again covered in water like it is today.